Good morning. Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I'm really delighted to be here, and it's a great honor to have the opportunity to speak, especially after fantastic meeting summit yesterday. I think that will be memorable for all of us who participate. And let me also mention that it's really great to meet so many distinguished participants and many friends and colleagues who are gathered here. So today, as you have heard in the kind introduction, I will say a few words about science, technology, and innovation, how they can contribute to the grand transformation that might be ahead of us. And like yesterday, I will illustrate that with a number of slides. So let me go to the first one. Just as an introduction, this is from the COP27 in Egypt, from the Ocean Day, and it's visual notes, and many of you have seen other visual notes of the similar nature. The point is that some of the things that come out resonate with all of us. If you look at the lower left corner, we need action now. In the middle, we need a holistic narrative. Absolutely, we've heard that yesterday. Solutions, resilience, and so on. And I think it is so. I think one can say that we know what needs to be done. Scientific communities have contributed to that. The challenge is really how. And from my point of view, it all started almost 200 years ago. This is the first steam railway in the world, Stockton-Darlington. The point is that that launched this explosive industrial revolution that brought benefits to many, but also lots of problems. And the point was not a single technology, not a single institutional activity, but the convergence of many of them. So steel, iron, steam, coal, then industrial manufacturing, and so on. So many technologies converged together to launch the humanity into a completely new development phase. And to elaborate a little bit on what I mentioned yesterday, that has two sides, this story. I would like to now expand. Yesterday, I showed the global mean temperature change from 1880 to today. Now, I would like to go back to the last ice age, 20,000 years ago. And this is, again, in degrees Celsius. And if you see, we had a gradual warming on average until about 10,000 years ago, and from then on the climate has been exceedingly constant. It did not vary much more than 1 degree Celsius. And so this period is called Holocene, and it's the cradle of humanity. This is when we settled down, organized the agriculture, early civilizations. But look what happened. You see this hockey stick above. That is since 1880, the graph I have shown yesterday. And here is the Paris Agreement. So you can see that we are not very far from the Paris Agreement, and we'll probably exceed it before we come down, even if we do everything right. And why is this a problem? Because many of the Earth system dimensions are under danger of tipping. This is an older graphic. IPCC has focused quite a lot in the sixth assessment report on the tipping of the Earth systems. So did the Earth Commission. It was just a paper published now in Nature. But the point I would like to make, without going into the detail, that even in the Paris range, there are serious concerns. In the Earth Commission Nature paper, we argue that 4 tipping elements in the Earth system are endangered at 1.5 degrees and 6 at 2 degrees. So there are lots of reasons for concern. There are also many scenarios on the way forward. I don't need to go into the detail, but importantly, there are many scenarios and visions how we can achieve Paris, and that's indicated here in the green curve. So the way forward, I think, is clear. As I said, what needs to be done, but how is a big challenge. So one thing is for certain, we don't know exactly how this will go, but there is a huge change ahead, one way or the other, whether we act or not act. In one case, it's positive. In the other case, not negative. And again, I would like to just show the image of the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda. And this is really my favorite favorite picture, even though it's not in English. The reason is that they're all jumbled together. There is no orderly set. And I think this is really important because of the immensely strong relationships among the SDGs. I think this kind of symbolizes that this is an integrative and holistic agenda, that we cannot work in the silos. Just take 7 and 13. Energy and climate, you just cannot untangle them. But that's also true for food and water and everything else. So they need to be taken together. And I would like to go back to a slide I've shown yesterday before I go forward. What we have done in the World in 2050 initiative that we started in 2015 was trying to reduce the complexity and provide scientific basis for the 2030 agenda. And we developed the 6 transformations. And I believe that based on the evidence that these 6 transformations, if achieved, could lead to all of the 17 goals and their 169 targets. Similar, almost identical 6 were proposed in the Global Sustainability Report. And as yesterday, I would like to just mention that the International Science Council, that you see the icon in the middle, is representing the science and technology major group in the UN process. So we all have a voice. Scientific communities have a voice, but I think it needs to be much, much stronger. Science has a key role to play in this major transformation. So now let me just go back to, I think, 2 dimensions of why we should not leave anybody behind. And this is, of course, a very stylized graph. On the graphic, on the horizontal scale, you see human well-being. On the vertical scale, service provision, or if you wish, consumption of services. Now, very often in the UN and other contexts, people are talking about providing basic access to energy, water, food, to the billions who are left behind. I would like to argue that this is not good enough. If you want to have a safe and just world, we have to go above that. But there is also the other side of the story. A minority overconsumes, leading to obesity and many other problems. So too much and too little is a problem. So we need to do more with less. That's the point. And in the scientific literature, there is increasing evidence that the sufficiency corridor is the way to go. That means decent life for everybody, well above minimum, but also below overconsumption. And that, again, on the issue how is difficult. It will probably need new values, new norms, morality and ethics. And the question is, how will that occur? And I think, again, science in an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary sense has an important role to play there. But I think potential is there, and that's what I would like to just share with you, based again on the literature. What you see here, look just at the graphic on the upper right corner. This shows energy provision. On the left of that graphic are the energy that we harvest from the nature, coal, sunlight, and so on. And on the right are the services that we provide, like the warm room. The point I would like to make here, I think that's quite important. If you look how much services are delivered from the inputs, the ratio is 7 to 1. That means for every avoided unit of services, we save 7 units of primary energy. And that's true for other systems as well. If you look on the left, we have the energy use in industry, then in the building sector, in the transport. In the transport, we all know it's exceedingly inefficient. This is where the highest potentials are. That means avoiding 1 unit of services can bring huge benefits for all of us. The other examples is the material use, steel. It's not all that much different, nor is the irrigation water. So the message is that the potential is there huge, but we need to deploy and introduce the technology. So that's the challenge for the future. And the challenge is that the technological change is deeply uncertain. It is cumulative and it's systemic. And cumulative means we need to work on it for continuous time. You cannot go up and down. And Schumpeter has distinguished between 2 types of technological change that I think is quite important. First is the incremental, slow change, that we are all familiar with, improvement in efficiency and so on. But there are also periods of really disruptive, radical changes, like the Stockton-Darlington Railway that I showed at the beginning, and he called it the gales of creative destruction. So that's what we really need now, gales of creative destruction for the new pathway forward. And I think he used a very nice metaphor. Schumpeter said, add as many male coaches as you please, you will never get a railroad by doing so. And I think this is really an important insight in this structural change, technological change on the way forward. And here are my two favorite pictures, if I may share them with you. This is the Easter Parade on the Fifth Avenue in New York City in 1900 and 1913, and I think you see the point. In 1900, mostly horses and carriages. In 13, mostly motor vehicles. So absolutely radical change in a very short period of time. And I think this is a hopeful message on the way forward. I mean, we can do it because we have done it before, if we put our minds together. And this is true around the world. I mean, these are just examples from the research we did many, many years ago. Replacement of horse carriages by automobiles in UK, you see about 30 years. That's true almost everywhere in the world, even though the process is staggered. It started very late in some countries. And it's also true for other rolling stocks, like on the railways. So a period of 30 years for small, granular type of technologies, and this is why the service orientation is so important, can be very, very fast. Example from more recent history that you're all familiar from personal experience is the devices that the mobile phone, smartphone replaces. They're shown in the middle. Some of them are digital, other analog, but the point is that together they require about 550 watts of energy. Now, they also require about 70 watts to be in the standby. Apologies, they require about 450 watts, all of these devices together. And if you compare that with the mobile phone that was introduced by Motorola, also 30 years ago, by the way, and everybody has one today in the whole world. We have more phones and more connections than the people on the planet, but it uses only about 5 watts. So 1/100 of the energy of the devices it potentially replaces. Of course, it's important not to keep all of the devices like people keep the old refrigerators on their balcony or whatever. So it is important to fully deploy this change. And even in terms of material and energy investment in the mobile phone, it looks very good. It's a factor of 25. So you can see that the message I'm trying to make is that I think the end use, the services, and our behaviors are most important. If you wish, I mean, technology is part of the society. It's not independent of us. And so what the conclusion I would like to make is basically that the future characteristics of our systems, for example, cost and performance, efficiency, are not a function of time. They're a function of what we are doing. They are a function of R&D, deployment, investment, and so on. And improvements occur to the accumulation of experience. I think that this is another important, through learning by doing. And the process is not linear. You don't do R&D at the beginning and then you deploy. It's recursive. You need science, you need engineering, all the way through from the birth to the death of the technology, if you wish. And here is an example of how powerful this process is. My apologies is that this is a double log scale. So just think about it. Straight lines like this one are actually exponential curves. And this shows the improvement in costs on the vertical scale of the photovoltaic cells. And today they're just about the cheapest technology if you want to produce electricity. And the improvement is, in this case, 20% cost reduction per doubling of global shipments of the photovoltaics. This is the power of learning by doing. Many other technologies fall into the range. There is the hockey stick for nuclear. I will not go into the details. It would take too much time. Let me just say it's an example of forgetting by not doing. And it's also a lumpy technology. Now, here I would just like to illustrate to you that there are many, many systems. On the vertical scale, you have, again, this learning. That was 20% for the photovoltaic cells, and on the horizontal global shipments. And you can see that many technologies that I would call granular, even some of them have cost reductions of 30–40% per doubling of the shipment. So it's a huge potential. The lumpier, the bigger ones, have significantly lower learning. So, but you need both for the infrastructures, but the key is that transformation at the consumer is the most important. And let me just share with you the slide I've shown yesterday. I think that there is strong evidence that the digital technologies will be accelerating, just like the smartphones or the replacement or horses by cars, that there's going to be a very swift, perhaps even faster process. Here are some examples that I mentioned yesterday in blue: ownership to usership, then shared economy in red, and integrated solutions in yellow. And I think this is really important when we think about the convergence of AI, of robotics, additive manufacturing, deep learning, and many, many other systems together, a little bit like the steam and railways at the beginning 200 years ago. And this is how this might look like, just an image. Sometimes pictures tell more stories than the words. These are 5 areas of services. There are railways, flying machines, telecommunication, individual mobility, and industrial processes in ages. These are just exemplary pictures, but I think you will agree with me that in periods of 5 decades, they have changed really radically. And what is important, and it's a miracle in some ways of human society, that the vertical, also, they all mesh together into these new techno-economic social paradigms. And who of us knows what will happen by 2050? I would argue nobody. On the other hand, I have plotted here some possibilities. These are all carbon-free technologies that could be empowered by digitalization and perhaps would form a new cluster into the future. So let me come to the conclusion. I also want to say something about the scientific advice mechanisms, because there are many scientific advisors here. Just 2 words about the European community process, which I think is unique. These are 16 scientific opinions that propose policy actions on different topics, all systemic in my view. You can see oceans there, then energy transition that I focus quite a lot about, but also challenges of overcoming the crisis or cancer screening. And the reason why this system is unique from my point of view is the 6 scientific advisors are independent of the Commission. They're also not paid by the Commission, not employed by the Commission, but together with the Commission decide on what are the important topics. And then a consortium of European academies conducts an assessment, very similar to IPCC, and based on that evidence-based assessment, then the advisors produce policy recommendations on the way forward. And then perhaps the last thing that I just briefly mentioned yesterday in the presentation, the new Bauhaus initiative, that I'm very personally committed to that. I think it's a great initiative on the way to a sustainable future, and the cities that are a critical part of it. Many of you might remember that 100 years ago there was a Bauhaus movement that united artists, architects, craftspeople together to build renewable, sustainable, and most importantly, in my way, pleasant and beautiful surrounding and regional, regional development. So the idea here is also to inspire a movement. There are many architects participating already in that. And the three key words in a paper that we published last year to provide scientific basis for this, for the Bauhaus, we argue that what is really important is sustainability, inclusion. It has to be bottom-up, people movement, but from my point of view, importantly, it has to be beautiful. It cannot be just functional. And perhaps this is another way of absorbing carbon dioxide through using sustainable materials. So I would like to come, this is my slide, last slide to the conclusion. This is from the March for Science. It says support science because science supports you. I would even argue that without science there is no future. Without knowledge and a plan, we will just walk randomly over the next few decades. So I think we need science. And science should not be silenced. So I think the way forward, it is important that the scientific communities merge together to produce this message. And so thank you very much. I've come to the close. These are the two papers on which I made some of these comments today as well. Thank you very much.